everybody, how's it going? Part 2! This is where things really start to pick up in book 2, I will say. Like, the beginning's good. Parts 2 and 3, honestly, yeah, it keeps getting better. And I'm not biased, it's not like I'm biased or anything, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm hoping this one goes good. I just ate, got my lemonade right there. Alright, Pen, I understand. So I'm just gonna real quick reiterate the rules here. Feel free to chat in the chat. Just understand that I really can't reply due to the fact that I will be reading and I don't want to break flow. But your messages are very much appreciated, and I do smile when I see them, so like reactions to stuff, so by all means, feel free to do that, just, yeah. Alright, so, let me see here, bada bingo, bada bongo, here we go. I realized in the last stream I didn't, hey, welcome, I didn't actually, I didn't name each of these characters, even though we probably would know them, if you've read book 1, so I'm just gonna go ahead and go from left to right, and I'll tell you who's who. Sarah O'Malley, Nonami Issei, Usako Takibana, Emiko Ayame, Rei Kobayashi. Okay. And poor Rei has the chat box covering her face a little bit. But, okay, with all that out of the way, oh, hello, floating torso. With all that done and out of the way, you're here to hear a book. So by God, you're gonna hear a book. Part 2. It took several days for much of the snow that had fallen on Fumizaki to melt, even with constant 40-degree-plus weather. In that time, the Yuki Onna had made herself quite at home in the temporary living quarters Gardner provided her. At least as much at home as possible, considering the girl was still trying to remember who she had been and what she had enjoyed in life. Thus far, the only things she remembered with absolute clarity were that she loved a certain platforming video game about an Italian plumber, and that she had a passion for jogging. Thus did Usako gain a new running mate for her early morning jogs. "On your left!" called the voice of Hime as she approached the pinkette from behind. This was the 3rd time this morning she'd managed to lap the girl. Even though Usako knew Hime's lack of corporeal form was the main reason for this, she couldn't help but find herself getting slightly more irritated each time she heard those 3 words. Now passing Usako, Hime glanced back quickly, smiling. She was so grateful to have made a friend in Usako, her first since she'd died. These early morning runs were a great way for her to feel, well, alive again, even if only a little. She did miss the sensation of her feet hitting the ground with every step, and that oh-so-welcome feeling of air in her lungs. Huh. It sure felt weird to say, I miss having lungs, but here she was. "Oh, here comes Usako again," thought Hime, opening her mouth to once again say the pinkette's new least favorite words. "On your left! Hey, Hime! Hold on," said Usako, pausing her run for a moment. "This is great and all, honestly. I'm glad to have another friend." An ominous shadow then passed over her face as she continued. "But if I hear the words, 'on your left,' one more time, I'm going to yeet you into the Pacific. We clear?" Nodding emphatically, Hime continued on her jog, noting that the ominous shadow around Usako had faded. Suddenly, she stopped dead in her tracks. Another memory was surfacing, but this one was different. She was in a bathroom, looking in a mirror, but the person she saw was someone else? A boy? What? She reached out to try and touch him, but the vision faded away before she could learn anything else. "Hime? Hey, Hime? Usuko was kneeling over the collapsed form of her friend, trying to figure out if you could do CPR on a ghost, when the snow girl snapped back to full consciousness. Usuko! She shouted, embracing the girl. I had another memory come back. I think. Both her tone and her expression were filled with confusion and uncertainty, like she was having trouble believing what she had seen. Hey, it's all right, said Usuko reassuringly. I'm right here. It's okay. Hey, I was just kidding about the eating thing, by the way. Helping the semi-corporeal girl up, as best she could, Usuko noticed ice crystals had formed in the corners of her eyes. Hey, you got something right here, she said, motioning to her own eyes. Hime reached up and brushed them away. Were they tears? Had she been crying? Something very weird was happening, and Hime didn't like it. It was time to get to the bottom of this. Time to get her memories back. Somehow. I think I need to talk with O'Malley-san, she said, brushing herself off out of habit. I can't put it off much longer. I need my memories back. My human memories. Usuko nodded in understanding. Alright, that's probably a good idea. Do you want me to come with you? I don't mind, honest. Hime considered the offer for a moment, before shaking her head softly. Sorry, Usuko, but this is something I need to do for myself. Thank you. Her morning exercise now complete, Usuko made her way to HQ in order to check in with Nonami, as well as let her know about Hime's experience. I see, said the vampire from behind her new desk, once Usuko had finished her report. And she didn't mention anything at all about what she saw? You're certain? The pinkette nodded. That's right, although I didn't exactly ask her. Whatever it was, it had enough power to knock her down, so I figured it would be rude to ask if she didn't offer, you know? The faintest of smiles danced across Nonami's lips as she sighed. Usuko, you have a good heart, but in circumstances like this, you should probably ask. Seeing as we still know very little about her, anything we can learn from her memories could help expedite the process. Shuffling some papers, Nonami continued. Still, I would say you probably made the best choice. Now then, as the snow has more or less melted away, we're sending a team back to Aoyama to locate and remove any more of those talismans you discovered last time. I'd like you to go, since, due to your magical affinity, you'd have a better chance of sniffing out any potentially hidden ones. So I'm a bloodhound now? Groaned Usuko, already not looking forward to another trek up the mountain. Think of it as a compliment, said Nonami. Your magic skills have been improving as of late, so much so to the point where we can rely on you in the field. More so than before, she quickly added, not wanting to insult Usuko. You'll be accompanied by Rei, myself, and Emiko. I believe I've sat on the sidelines long enough now. Yeah, that's why, replied Usuko teasingly. I'm sure it's not because you want Emi-chan to show... Wait, hold on. I'm sure it's not because you want Emi-chan to show you up. Hardly, she shouted, despite herself. I just feel the more of us that go, the quicker this will all take. Usuko got up to head out the door. Well, whatever. As you command. She paused, turning back to Nonami. Aunt Maria. Giggling, she fled, but not before hearing Nonami shout, And stop calling me that! As that was going on, Hime was floating through the halls of HQ, trying to find Sarah, but to no avail. The Banshee was just nowhere to be found. Slightly disheartened, Hime made a deep sigh, unsure what her next objective should be. Maybe she could find someone else with afterlife experience? It was certainly a possibility, though Sarah was, for now, the only spirit Hime knew. She'd just have to be patient and wait for Sarah to arrive. Not too hard. After 5 minutes, the snow girl was nearly at her breaking point, and the ambient air temperature around her had begun to plummet reflexively. From behind her, a door swung open, much to Hime's surprise. It was one of the cat girls who were in charge, Hime noted, but not the violet-haired woman she'd met before. No, this one was quite the opposite, with lime green hair kept in pigtails, loose-fitting clothes over a supermodel's body, and wearing a colander on her head while pointing a broom directly at Hime? Yeah, she hissed, pushing the broom handle into Hime's incorporeal stomach. Be gone! I ain't afraid of no ghost! Out of sheer instinct, Hime froze the broom handle, causing the cat girl, Cecily, to drop it with a small yelp. I'm sorry, miss. I'm not trying to hurt or scare you. I'm just looking for Sarah O'Malley. Have you seen her? Unlikely, came a second, similarly accented voice from behind, triggering Hime to swivel and face it. My sister tries to avoid Ms. O'Malley whenever possible. Spirits are something my sister's always been afraid of, whether she wants to admit it or not. Cecily stuck her tongue out at her sister for that statement. Rolling her eyes, Lydia continued. If you're looking for her, though, I'd try one of the training rooms. It's where she often spends her free time. Gulping, Hime nodded her head. And where are those again? Sorry, I'm still new here and all. Lydia chuckled warmly, motioning with her one good arm down the hall. Go to the third junction, take a left, then a right, down the stairs 5 floors, and follow the signs. Y'all got that? Nodding once more in acknowledgement, Hime began making her way down the path Lydia had given her. The purple-haired cat girl looked over at her sister, pulling the colander off of her head and sighing deeply in exasperation. Give me that. As Hime made her approach, she noticed what sounded like people fighting nearby. When she got close to the source, she saw a nearly completely physical Sarah in a sports bra, shorts, and surrounded by dozens of faceless people, all in menacing poses and closing in on her fast. What the Yukiona also noticed was the nonplussed expression on Sarah's face, as she began giving each of her would-be attackers a right walloping. Her moves were quick, frighteningly so, and varied as she seemed to be using several different hand-to-hand styles at once. Once her foes had been dispatched and lay helplessly on the ground, the now motionless figures faded away as Sarah's body returned to its usual translucent form. Deciding it might be smarter to knock, rather than risk having Sarah mistake her for another foe, Hime rapped her fist twice on the door. Glancing over and recognizing her, Sarah motioned for Hime to come in and join her, which she gladly did. Top of the morning, Thea, she said, taking a seat on one of the benches. What brings you here, Hime? Did Usko give you some trouble? Oh, don't mind her. The lass just has some temper issues she needs to work out. Hime shook her head. No, that's not why I'm here. Her words caught in her throat as she recalled what had happened earlier. I'm having more memories come back, but they're not right, I think. A puzzled look crossed Sarah's face. Not right? What do you mean by that? How would you know? Well, the person in the mirror couldn't be me. Sarah's puzzled expression intensified. Hold on, what? Lass, you might need to back up for just a bit. Why don't you start from the beginning? On the other side of HQ, Usuko and company were about to make their return to Mount Aoyama. Our first mission together in a while, cheered Ray, pulling a large pack onto her back. Though it wasn't their full team, as Sarah was currently occupied, this was to be their first official mission as a unit since Usuko had joined. The young girl had to admit she was certainly excited, if not a little nervous. Such was to be expected, she assumed, even though she'd been out in the field several times already. This just had a different feeling to it that Usuko couldn't explain. As the pinkette pulled on a similar pack to Ray's, she couldn't help but shake this sense of foreboding she felt. Silly though it was. Then again, Nonami told her, listen to your instincts. They will serve you well in the midst of conflict. So, hey Nonami, is it normal to feel a little nervous about going out there? The vampire glanced over at her teammate. Today, in preparation for what was likely to be a multi-day trip, Nonami was wearing something a little more appropriate for the environment than her usual casual outfit. Decked out in a black and pink trim, long-sleeved tee, a pair of black leggings, and a large black sun hat with a pink bow. She was also sporting a pair of sunglasses to protect her somewhat sensitive eyes. Usuko had also thought to dress for the occasion, sporting the usual athletic gear from her morning runs, with the addition of a light white jacket over her upper torso to keep some of the sun at bay. I suppose, though there's nothing to be concerned with, honestly. We're just going to recover any remaining talismans and, if possible, locate the individual Hime-san mentioned who has been putting them out. As far as field missions go, added Ray calmly, it's nothing too extreme. Think of it like, a nature walk. I'm trying not to, groaned the Pinkette. For a first mission, you couldn't ask for much better, said Nonami. Nice and simple. Certainly a breeze compared to the last one Kobayashi-san and I went on. The mission Nonami referred to was, of course, the investigation of a blue Oni on the rampage, which had turned out to be Emiko. The pair had managed to save Usuko in the nick of time, just before the mind-controlled girl had been about to kill her. Needless to say, compared to that, what they were about to do was, quite literally, a walk in the park. Their gear loaded and ready, the four girls began making their way towards Mount Aoyama. The Oni, using their wings to fly on ahead, leaving Nonami and Usuko to manage their own way. This was entirely by design, as Nonami had recently given Usuko yet another spell book, one that contained a spell which would allow the Pinkette to fly unaided, something the vampire very much wanted to see. Something the vampire wanted very much to see. Not out of any desire to see Usuko fail, of course, no. She genuinely wanted to see how much her niece had improved in the past weeks. Usuko's angelic wings weren't exactly conducive to flight, after all. At least, not yet. She still had a long ways to go in building up the muscles required for flight, so this spell would be able to aid her in the interim. She had quite easily enough managed to learn several offense-based spells, such as summoning flames and lightning, as well as a basic energy projection attack. But the more advanced magic was still eluding her. Now then, Takibana-san, said Nonami, motioning to the courtyard in front of them, show me what you've learned. We're going to fly there as well. To Usuko's surprise, Nonami began levitating into the air. Come on, we don't have all day. Usuko grimaced, knowing what Nonami expected of her, and saying she hadn't exactly mastered it yet would have been too kind. Even still, she closed her eyes, focusing on the energy she had at her disposal. I can do this, she thought, tightening her fists. Just gotta believe. As Nonami watched, Usuko's hair began flowing upwards, followed shortly by the rest of her ascending slowly into the air, a few inches at a time. The vampire wanted to say some words of encouragement, but one look at Usuko's strained expression told her even a peep would break her focus and send her plummeting back into the ground. After Usuko was about 10 feet up, she started to feel a bit more comfortable with it, and allowed herself to open her eyes. She was actually shocked to see she was so high up already, almost breaking her focus and losing about 6 inches in elevation. She might have fallen further if not for Nonami rushing to brace her. Careful, Usuko, she said. You're doing fine, but you have to remember not to lose focus. Your progress is impressive, but do you think you're up to flying there? Considering her options, Usuko decided she would. She could use the experience, and besides, it would be kind of nice to go for a flight with just her and Nonami. Yeah, I think so, she said hesitantly. I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of this, but, I don't suppose you can stick close in case I start to fall? Of course, said Nonami warmly, turning towards the direction their team members had gone. Now let's get a move on, As Nonami and Usuko began their journey, Emiko and Rei had already ended theirs. arriving at the rendezvous point and were beginning to set up a makeshift base camp. The Red Oni had chosen to wear a rather revealing outfit of a green tube top, which didn't do a lot to conceal her rather large chest, and certainly didn't hide her rock-solid abs. Denim short shorts with fishnet stockings that looked the worst for wear, and a black New York Yankees ball cap. Added to this ensemble were the bright red trainers on her feet, certainly not something one would typically wear on a hiking expedition. Emiko, on the other hand, had dressed far more appropriately for the occasion, by her own estimate, as they were going to be hunting around in the woods for what would likely be hours, if not a day or two. She wore a modest, but snug, purple tank top, so as not to snag on any brush, as well as a pair of khaki cargo shorts, with an overabundance of pockets and straps for attaching bottles, rations, or what have you. Furthermore, she wore knee-length socks on the off chance there may be ticks in the forest. Top it off with a pair of military surplus hiking boots and a wicker sun hat, she was ready for just about anything. Each girl also had a large backpack containing many camping essentials such as tents, canned food, a few emergency flares, and of course, a solar-powered charging station for their mobile devices. However, it appeared that Ray's backpack was incomplete, as she couldn't find the mallet for pounding her tent spokes in. Yep, she could probably just use her Oni strength, but this was supposed to be a human mode-only mission, and she wasn't about to flub it up. Glancing over, though, she noticed Emiko had one lying on the ground near her. "Like, toss me that mallet, would ya?" said Ray, as the blue Oni was rummaging through her own pack, looking for something. "Excuse me?" rebutted Emiko, a bit put off by Ray's tone. "You're excused," grunted Ray. "Now toss me that mallet so I can, finish setting this tent up." Now feeling more than a bit taken aback, Emiko looked her in the eyes. "Now see here, I'm not one to take orders from the likes of you, Red. You want something, the least you can do is say please." "Oh, I'm so terribly sorry," said Ray mockingly. "I forgot I was dealing with Her Royal Majesty here. Look, when we're out like this, titles don't mean squat, Emmy. We have more important stuff to worry about." She reached down, grabbing the mallet, and pounded the stakes of her tent into the ground with a single swing each. Without missing a beat, she then stood back up and handed the mallet to Emiko. "If you don't like it, you don't have to stick around." As soon as she said that, Ray winced. The animosity between Red and Blue Oni was something rather well known, and though both girls had managed a sort of semi-truce, sometimes words came out before either had a chance to think. This was one such time. Let me get a little drink here, hold on. Her grip around the blunt instrument tightened as Emiko looked Ray dead in the eyes. "The only reason I'm here is because of Usako," she bit out. "Someone has to look after her. It may as well be the one person who knows her best. Were it up to me, we wouldn't be here. She wouldn't be here." Speaking of," said Ray in an attempt to change the conversation, "how long have you two been friends? I know you're, super close and all, but it's something I've just been wondering, I guess." Emiko chuckled in relief as old memories came rushing at her. Most all of them pleasant. "Oh, quite some time, actually. We've been friends since the 3rd grade, when she punched me square in my mouth and knocked me over." Ray's purple eyes went wide as dinner plates. Are we talking about the same Usako?" she asked in shock. To punch an Oni was one thing, but to knock one down? Even as a kid, that just wasn't something that happened, let alone to someone as highborn as Emiko. "Yeah, I was pretty well stunned too," said Emiko with a laugh, though in her defense, I had more than earned it. Back then, Usako was, well, even more reserved than she is now. Her family had just moved to the country the year before, and she had basically no friends. Barely even spoke Japanese, and with her pink hair, a lot of kids just sorta didn't want to be around her. Emiko began setting up her own tent as she continued telling the story. I had noticed that she was always sitting alone, either in class or at lunch or just about anywhere, really. Not doing anything to bother anyone, but I don't know. Young me was, if you'll pardon the expression, a bit of a shithead, and decided I'd pick on her for that. First time I said something bad to her, BAM! Right in the mouth. Knocked me flat on my butt. At first I was pissed, and I was going to throw her in the hall, but then I realized something. This human had not only stood up to me, but had managed to take me to task with one punch. Reaching up to wipe some sweat off her brow, Emiko turned to Ray, who by now was fully invested in her story. After the obligatory stay in detention, the only time I've ever gone, mind you, I apologized to her and asked if we could be friends. She thought I was messing with her at first, though who could blame her, yeah? But eventually she realized I was being sincere in my overtures, and we quickly became the best of friends. There were more than a few times I'd even considered letting her in on the truth, but Father insisted I wait till we were adults. How I wish I'd been able to do so. Nodding in understanding, Ray placed a hand on Emmy's shoulder. Hey, it's not your fault, Emiko. I know. You've heard it like a million times now, but it's true. And yeah, I get wanting to wait for the right time to let someone close to you know. My last girlfriend, she didn't take it so well. Emiko cocked an eyebrow at that. Girlfriend? She asked. Ray, you're a lesbian? Well, yeah. That's not, like, a problem or anything, is it? Emiko's hands went up disarmingly, shaking her head back and forth. No, she stammered. No, not at all. It's 2020 for crying out loud. Ray giggled. That's good. The last thing I'd want is to work with a teammate who's, well... I getcha, replied Emiko. No need to explain. Does anyone else on the team know? I don't want to accidentally out you or anything. That made the Red Oni smile. Well, Nonami knows, but that's it. But it's also not exactly a secret, though I'd appreciate if you'd let me be the one to tell the others, you know? I believe I understand, responded Emiko, fiddling with her hands nervously. Truth be told, She sighed. Oh, never mind. It's nothing. Anyway, her tent now assembled, Emiko started working on preparing an area for a fire pit for later, if only to avoid the topic she'd almost brought up. Ray, knowing Emiko had more to say, but also knowing these things take their time, opted to keep her mouth closed for now and allow Emiko whatever time she needed to find herself. After about an hour of idle chit-chat, she noticed two airborne shapes on the horizon, getting closer, though one of them was clearly struggling to keep up with the other. Hey, here comes Issei-san and Uso-chan, cheered Ray as Emiko sighed in relief. Much as she appreciated the Red's company, the somewhat airheaded girl had a tendency to ramble on about any given topic for what felt like an eternity. As the Oni waved the two girls down, it was Nonami who landed first, gently touching down on the ground. Usuko, however, had a bit more trouble landing, losing her balance and colliding head first with Emiko. Sorry about that, Emi-chan, she apologized. Guess I still need more practice, huh? Helping Usuko up, Emiko brushed some dust off the girl's shoulder. You're doing fine, Uso-chan. No one's perfect at flying the first time, not even me. I mean, well, it's a little different for you, but the idea's the same. Perhaps I could give you some tips for landing sometime. Usuko's eyes lit up. Yeah, of course, she said enthusiastically. I'd absolutely love it. You've always taken such good care of me, Emi-chan. I don't know what I'd ever do without you. Blushing, Emiko diverted her gaze towards a knowing Ray. Yeah, me either. And I hope I never have to find out, she added mentally. With some trouble on Usuko's part, the latecomers were able to set up their tents rather easily. Each one had been color-coded, likely Cecily's idea, to match with each girl's respective hair color, with Ray in a red tent, Nonami in an orange tent, etc. With the day still young, each girl took to a different cardinal direction in order to find the remaining talismans. Ray, Emmy, and Nonami each had a special magic sniffer device the R&D team had developed for such missions. Meanwhile, Usako would be relying on her own heightened senses to locate the elusive paper slips. Knowing their tasks could take several hours, likely into the next day, thus necessitating the use of camping gear, each girl carried several bottles of water, ration bars, as well as a change of clothes, a compass, and most importantly, a special mini shredder for disposing of their targets in their backpacks. Grateful she had thought to plan ahead, Usako took out her iPod and put a pair of headphones on before setting an audiobook to play. She'd been meaning to catch up on a few Star Wars novels, but she just didn't have the patience to sit down and actually read them. This would be the perfect opportunity to do so, she thought. Let me get another drink here. I'm going to leave the cap off this time. Okay. After about an hour, she'd found maybe 12 of the talismans. Some had been pretty easy to locate, with no real effort having been put in their hiding spots. A few had required a little bit of creative thinking on Usako's part, either using a bit of telekinesis magic to shake the high branches of a tree to knock one down, or using fire magic to set a branch on fire before using said branch to ignite the paper, as the talismans appeared to be immune to direct uses of magic, something that made Usako a little grumpy. How the heck does that make any sense? She mumbled to the sound of TIE fighters in her ears. Just because someone writes a few lines on a scrap of paper, suddenly magic fire can't burn it? But if I set something else on fire, then use that to burn it, it works? Who the heck wrote these rules? Sorry, Usako. In her grumbling, the pinkette almost missed her step and nearly walked right into a stream. With a sigh, she removed the headphones and turned her iPod off. Maybe I better just focus on the task at hand, she said, carefully stepping over the flowing creek. Knowing my luck, I probably missed a few. Something caught her eye then. Another talisman flapping in the wind, but this one was attached to the doorway of a rather dilapidated-looking house? Who was living all the way out here besides Hime? Maybe that's Hime's house, thought Usako as she approached the somewhat... Did I use the word dilapidated? I used the word dilapidated twice. The somewhat dilapidated-looking structure. I need to fix that later. Off to the side yard, she noticed what appeared to be two shrines, two shrines dedicated to who was starting over. Off to the side yard, she noticed what appeared to be two shrines dedicated to who was likely the parents of whoever lived, or had lived, here. Using a pair of decently thick sticks, Usako was able to wiggle the talisman off the doorframe and shred it. She then decided to see if anyone was home. After all, it had been a few hours, and she really wanted to avoid using nature's toilet if she could help it. With her first knock, the door fell flat off its hinges and slammed into the ground, loud enough to make Usako jump. Well, that probably settled whether or not anyone lived here. And if they did, well, she'd pay to have it fixed regardless, but... Looking around, Usako knew she wouldn't have to worry about explaining herself to the homeowner. The place was absolutely covered in dust and cobwebs, and other small brown things Usako cared not to identify. It was a small, 3-room house with a living room, a kitchenette, and a bedroom. Apparently, whoever had lived here had no use for indoor plumbing, much to Usako's chagrin. In the bedroom, she found stacks of old Shonen Jump magazines, a few small anime figures, and an absolutely ancient CRT television on top of a dresser across from the former occupant's bed. And next to that TV was... Holy crap, that's a Super Famicom. With Super Mario World, said Usako in excited awe. I guess whoever lived here must have had good taste in video games. Moving into the kitchen, Usako had an idea. Most people tend not to keep food past its expiration date, so maybe if there was anything left, she could use it to figure out how long the place had been abandoned. With trepidation and a pinched nose, she carefully opened the long-without-power fridge and used telekinesis to lift a green and yellow gallon of milk out and set it on the counter. She gagged as she looked for the expiry. I can't see
this is what I expected to be doing today. Aha! Found it. Let's see. August 15th. Wow, that's been a while, huh?
And then a thought crossed Usako's mind again. She'd shrugged it off before as a joke, but Hime had mentioned her memories only going back about 3 months. And of the memories that had come back, one of the only ones was... Mamma mia, muttered Usako as she pulled her phone out. I better call the team over here now. This might actually be Hime's house from when she was alive. Of the 4 of them, Nonami had probably been having the worst luck in finding the talismans, with only 4 to her name. Still, she was certainly enjoying the rather peaceful walk through nature regardless. Then, breaking that serenity was the ringtone she'd assigned to Usako's number, a rather shrill ringing sound so as to be unmistakable as her niece's. Yes, Usako, she asked as she answered. Did you find anything out of the ordinary? Yeah, you could say that, replied Usako. Get everyone else and come to my location. You're not going to believe this. What is it? Well, it's a loud crashing sound, followed by intense swearing came from Usako's end. Nonami, get over here now! It's big and hairy and... The line went dead, and Nonami prayed it was the only thing that had. Back at the house, Usako had been speaking to Nonami when suddenly a large shadow passed by the grime-covered window. She hadn't really noticed it, but when the massive hulking shape blocked the doorway, she couldn't help but see it. The creature, or what Usako could see of it anyway, was massive and covered in white, shaggy hair, with massive, pink-skinned, 5-toed feet and long, thick arms. What she couldn't see was that the bulky creature was about as big as Emiko or Rei in their Super Oni states, if not a little bigger. Oh, hell no! She swore as it began trying to bash its way in, shouting at Nonami to get here fast before hanging up and calling on her powers, except they didn't come. What the hell? Oh, come on, not now, not now, not now! She pleaded with her crystal, trying in determination to summon her magical girl form. Thinking quick, she dived into the bedroom and began stacking as much furniture against the door as possible. What is that thing? She cried. Am I crazy? Or was that Bigfoot? Another crash, followed by the sound of timber striking timber, told Usako the thing had started to tear the walls down with vigor. Great, she thought sardonically. It doesn't even have to get to me if it can just crush me with the roof. Once again, she tried calling on her powers, but nothing happened. At this point, she was beginning to have Dark Emiko flashbacks when suddenly she realized what was happening. She was letting her fear get the better of her, and that was keeping her powers locked away. The problem was, Usako had no idea how not to be afraid when a 2-ton gorilla with notions was apparently out for your blood. But no, she couldn't allow herself to be killed by this thing. Not while she had to take care of Kuriko. Not while her baby sister was still counting on her to come home. Finally, she was able to call on her powers, readying a flame spell as she had an idea. Busting out the only window in the room, Usako saw that there was only a small gap between the house and the nearby hillside. Perfect, she thought as she began slowly shimmying up the side, and with perfect timing as well, for as soon as she'd reached the roof, the creature bust through the bedroom door, shaking the small house. On the horizon, she could see the airborne forms of Rei and Nonami, so she shot off a small fireball to signal them in, close, as she made her way back to the front. The creature, and now that she got a better look at it, Usako was certain it was some sort of Sasquatchian being, had really torn its way in, leaving an almost comically ape-sized hole in the structure. It hadn't taken it long for it to notice its prey had moved outside, but the massive brute was having a hard time negotiating the small building, and thus bought the girls a few minutes to plan. Wow, an actual Yeti, commented Rei as she eyeballed it from a distance. They're supposed to be pretty rare, and definitely not from around here. Not this far south. Indeed, said Nonami, casting a warding spell down on the ground. It wouldn't do much against the Yeti, but it would give them at least a few seconds should it surprise them. Which means it being here is likely not an accident. We should try to subdue, but not kill it. I have a feeling there's more at play here than we realize. Whatever you say, boss, said Usuko, switching from fire to electricity magic. Just tell me where the weak point is. Nonami laughed. Weak point? Usuko, it's a yeti. They're entirely made of muscle. They don't have any specific weak point. But if it's a male, it does, she muttered back. About then, Emiko came flying in, touching down just outside the field. Sorry I'm late, she said. I was pretty far out when I got the call. So what are we dealing with here? Pointing at the yeti, who had now managed to tear another wall down and was stalking towards the group, Nonami merely let actions speak louder than words. Ah, was Emiko's only reply. We're only trying to bring it down, explained Ray. Nonami thinks we should, take it back to base or something. I don't know. Nodding, Emmy began striding towards the beast as well, showing absolutely no fear. Oh, you're approaching me, she taunted. I suppose it's for the best, after all. She appeared to vanish for a split second as the yeti swung a massive hammer arm where she'd been stood. Suddenly reappearing behind it, the blue oni began raining a hail of blows onto its back and head. I can't beat the tar out of you without getting closer! Before long, though, it was clear that for all Emiko's strength, she was doing little more than annoying her foe. Finally having enough, it reached up and grabbed her, flinging her at the others, landing next to Ray in a heap. Muda, Muda, the red oni mumbled as she helped her counterpart up. Oh, shut up, jabbed Emiko. This thing is tough, but I wasn't giving it everything I have. I have an idea, but... Emiko was cut off as the yeti let out an immense roar, which echoed throughout the mountainside. At such a close range, the sound was like a physical wall slamming into the girls. You were saying, asked Nonami sarcastically. Hey, I got an idea, said Usuko hesitantly. Emmy, can you cast an illusion? A big one, to distract it? Meanwhile, Nonami, Ray, and I will use our powers to incapacitate it in whatever way we can. The vampire nodded. It was an all-right plan, in theory, but would it work? Wait, where was I? Shit. How good are you at illusions? She asked hesitantly. Emiko's eyes flicked to the yeti, who seemed to be satisfied just keeping them at bay for the moment. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm still learning. But do you have a better plan? Nonami hated to admit it, but she didn't. Usuko's plan, for all its faults, seemed to be their best chance, unless they could keep the yeti at bay until dusk, when she could use the full extent of her vampiric power. Something she very much doubted they could do. All right, this is your plan. So you take the lead, Usuko, she said, turning to the others. Remember, we're not trying to kill it. Already working on her illusion, Emiko's hands began swirling through the air in motions that seemed to blur if you looked closely at them. Around the yeti suddenly appeared dozens of copies of all four girls, each prepping different attacks to engage it. As for the real versions, Emiko had cast a bit of cloaking on them, enough so they'd be almost invisible amongst the duplicates. Doppelgangers of Ray and Emiko charged at the yeti, who raised his arms to block the blows that never came. While distracted, the very real Usuko unleashed a volley of lightning from her hands that would have made old Papa Palpatine proud. Not expecting the shock, it doubled over in pain, and straight into Nonami's open palm, which struck the yeti under the chin and, using its forward momentum against it, sent it careening into Ray, who began punching it in the head while shouting, "Go to sleep!" over and over. Go to sleep, 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 go to sleep. Ow. 1 second. You sure that'll hold it? Usuko asked warily, gazing at the unconscious yeti. It should, replied Nonami in a tone that indicated even she wasn't certain. Oh, I skipped a part. Sorry. Sorry. Once they were certain the yeti was unconscious, Emiko dispersed her illusion and Nonami called upon another of her mystic tools. The Bonds of Fate, which, To Usako, at least, this looked like some really strong rope. You sure that'll hold it? She asked, warily gazing at the unconscious Yeti. It should, replied Nonami in a tone that indicated even she wasn't certain. At least, it will definitely hold long enough for a pickup team to come and get him. Which reminds me... Pulling out her phone, Nonami dialed Lydia's number. Yes, we had a spot of trouble. No, nothing we couldn't handle. Just a Yeti. A pause. Yes, that's correct. We'll need our fuzzy friend picked up ASAP. But we have some further investigating to do. Yet another pause. No, I don't know if it's related to that, but I wouldn't be completely surprised either. Alright, I'll set down a flare for pickup. Issei out. Returning her phone to her pocket, Nonami removed her backpack and pulled out one of the emergency flares, igniting it and setting it down on the ground. Its intense red glare would be unmistakable to anyone on approach from land or air, and would signal the now incapacitated... Oh, crap, I lost my spot. Damn it. Returning her phone to her pocket, Nonami removed her backpack and pulled out one of the emergency flares, igniting it and setting it down on the ground. Its intense red glare would be unmistakable to anyone on approach from land or air, and would signal the now incapacitated Yeti's location to the cleanup crew. Alright, I'm gonna take real quick. Ray, don't do that again, please. Okay? That really threw me off. While that was going on, Usako and Ray were both checking on Emiko, who had reverted back to her regular form and was looking a bit pale. Hey, Emi-chan, are you alright? Asked a worried Usako. She'd never seen Emi look this bad. Even at one time she'd caught a nasty case of the flu back in 7th grade. She tried to say, but her mouth could barely form the words. What she wanted to say was that, physically at least, she was going to be fine. That she just overexerted herself in creating such an intense illusion, even if only for a moment. Instead, she motioned for some water, which Usako immediately provided her. Chugging the whole thing in a single gulp, she tossed the crinkled bottle to the ground. Another! She rasped with a weak smile, to Usako's slight bemusement. All right, son of Odin, she joked with a wink, handing her another bottle, which the Oni proceeded to drink, albeit at a much slower pace than the first bottle. But seriously, you're like super pale now. Are you feeling okay? Do you need to go home? Emiko shook her head. She had known what she was getting into when what she risked in creating such an elaborate illusion at her current level. She'd need a lot of carbs, and soon, but she'd be okay. Just, have Nonami call him back and ask to bring some noodles and bread for me to nosh on. About 20 minutes later, a helicopter touched down, and two very large individuals stepped out. One was nearly 8 feet tall, nearly as wide as Nonami was tall, with black hair and purple eyes. Must be an Oni, thought Usako. The other was nearly as tall, though lacked the width of his partner. Working in concert, the two men had little difficulty lifting the Yeti into the chopper, securing it with titanium bonds, as a third, much, much smaller individual hopped out with a large paper bag. Emiko recognized the boy as Aru Sarugami, the 8th boy who worked at Gardena as a courier. Relative of yours, Aru? Asked Ray with a... She's probably human mode now, so... Relative of yours, Aru? Asked Ray with a playful wink. No, ma'am, he replied awkwardly as he approached Emiko. Ape men are a different subspecies of Sasquatch than Yetis. Setting down next to Emiko, he opened the bag and pulled out what seemed to be an entire Olive Garden's worth of pasta and bread, with one of the guards bringing up a pitcher of water behind him. HQ wasn't sure how much you'd need, so they, went a little overboard. I hope it's to your liking, Princess Ayame. Smiling warmly, Emiko immediately devoured an entire loaf of bread in 2 bites. She attempted to speak, but all that came out was, She, I think she likes it, said Usuko. Thanks a bunch, Mr. Oh, I don't believe we've met. I'm Usuko Takibana. Aru nodded. We've, met, he said. Sorta. The first time you were unconscious after Lady Nonami was injured. The second time was when you were, possessed and sorta blew up part of HQ. The Pinkette winced. Even though she hadn't been in control of herself, knowing that a lot of people had been hurt by something using her body made Usuko feel terrible. She had just been grateful no one had died that day. Yeah, sorry about that. It's alright, said Aru, who hadn't intended to guilt-trip Usuko. It's like we, say in my village, fecal matter occurs. Now then, we'd better return to the base before this guy wakes up. Take care. Once the chopper was out of sight, Emiko turned to her friends, breadcrumbs and pasta sauce coating her mouth and cheeks. Hey, you know I can't finish this myself, right? Come on, dig in! Not needing any more of an invitation, Usuko and Rei began to dig in, both having worked up quite an appetite from both the long hike and subsequent battle. Nonami, meanwhile, took a glance at the wide array of starchy foods and decided against it. Besides, she explained, we vampires, for the most part, lack a sense of taste. Wait, what? Asked Usuko as she slurped down an exceptionally long spaghetti noodle. You mean you didn't actually like my stir-fry? Aw. No, well, I didn't mean, it had a good texture. I'm sorry, Usuko. It's fine. Their meal now complete, and the trash Usuko couldn't safely incinerate, stored in their packs for now, the group approached the now severely damaged house. So can anyone fill me in on why this is important? Asked Emiko, now back in her human form. With a nod, Usuko began to explain how it was mostly just a hunch, but the presence of the Famicom as well as the date on the milk and just an overall air of familiarity of the building had made her think it may have been Hime's home when she'd been alive. Then we should attempt to find any clues that may lead to her identity, stated Nonami. However, given how unstable the structure has likely become, it may be best if only two of us go in for now. She turned to Usuko. Is this agreeable? Well, of course, she replied, but if it's okay, I'd like Emmy to come with me. She's always had eagle eyes when it comes to finding hidden stuff. Is that okay, Emmy-chan? Emiko considered for a moment before shrugging. So-chan. While we're investigating inside, Issei and Kobayashi can check around the outside. I thought I saw an old shrine over on the east side of the house. To say the Yeti had smashed the place would be an understatement. Where it had stepped, the floorboards had mostly snapped in two, and the door frames of both the bedroom and main entryway were about twice as wide now. Still, whoever had built the house had definitely built it to last, as it seemed to be holding up well enough. In the bedroom, where the two girls were focusing their search for the moment, much of the furniture had been reduced to plywood scraps. The first thing Usuko had done, though, upon entering, was try to locate the Famicom. Her reasoning was twofold, and not wholly selfless. If it was Hime's, she reckoned, then it might help spring more memories back to her. And if it wasn't hers, well, Usuko was sure no one would mind if she kept it for herself. After all, letting a piece of classic gaming such as this rot in squalor was practically criminal. She was incredibly happy to discover that not only had the system and games somehow survived intact, but a box filled with more Super Famicom games had fallen from the closet, along with a box of what would traditionally be considered girls' clothes, and a flag Usuko didn't recognize. It had 5 horizontal stripes, 2 light blue on the top and bottom, with pink above and below those, and a single white stripe down the middle. She showed it to Emiko, who replied, Ah, yes, that's a trans pride flag, Usuko. Usuko's brow furrowed. Well, what's it doing here? Isn't this Hime's house? Emmy sighed. Well, firstly, we don't know for certain if it is hers. Secondly, it's possible it belonged to someone else who lived here. I don't know, though. Perhaps Nanami might have an idea. Nodding, Usuko set down one of the games she'd been looking at, carefully picked up the flag, and went outside to find Nonami. Ah, Usuko, you're just in time, said Nonami as she turned to face the girl. If this is indeed Hime's former home, then I believe we have just ascertained her last name. Kaguri. She then noticed what Usuko was carrying, tilting her head. Where did you find that? Oh, it was in a box of clothes we found in the bedroom closet, she replied. Emiko said it was a trans pride flag. You said it was in a box of clothes? Yeah, a lot of girls' clothes, answered Usuko, looking down at the flag in her hands. I wonder, Nanami, how does someone become a Yukiona? Standing up and motioning for her to follow, Nonami took Usuko back inside. She needed to get out of the sun for a bit anyway. Typically, a Yukiona is born when a human woman dies, and her disembodied spirit possesses an icicle. Or so the legends say. Usuko's expression became perplexed as she began trying to put the pieces together. So, what if that woman is a trans woman? Yukiona are rare in of themselves, Usuko, so this would likely be something without precedent for them. However, not without precedent entirely. I've heard of and met several spirits who, in their human lives, had been forced to live as their assigned gender and not the one they identified as. When they became spirits, however, their bodies were those they'd always been meant to have. Usuko mulled that over for a moment. Maybe it could explain Hime's freakout earlier. If Usuko had seen something that appeared to contradict everything she knew about herself, she'd probably would have a similar reaction. Hey, how about I call Base and have him send her here, yeah? Nonami shook her head. We still haven't cleared out all of the talismans, Usuko. Until we do, and find the individual responsible for them as well, it won't be completely safe for her here. However, it may be prudent to at least speak with her. Pulling out her mobile once again, Nonami dialed Sarah, the Banshee taking a bit longer than usual to answer. Hey, Nonami, you find anything? Quite possibly. Is Hime with you? Aye, we've been having a chat we have. Learned some interesting stuff. You need to speak to her. Eyeing the house, and the flag Usuko was holding, she nodded. Indeed, we've also found some very interesting things. All right, said Sarah over the line. I'll put her on. Excuse me. Her voice was muffled on the other end, but Nonami could faintly hear Sarah instructing the girl how to use the phone. All right, for maximum effect for this joke, I am going to put my mouth against the microphone. This is a headphone warning. You have 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Hello? Her mouth practically against the receiver, Hime's voice came through incredibly loud and distorted, causing Nonami to flinch reflexively. Good afternoon, Hime, she said quietly, regaining her composure and hoping to get the girl to match her tone. How are you feeling? Better now, I hope? There was an audible silence from the other end before. Yes, a bit. O'Malley-san, Sarah, was very helpful in calming me down and explaining some things. I admit I still have a few questions that need answering, but, Nonami could practically hear the fumbling of fingers in the girl's tone. Have you found anything out there? Possibly, yes, replied Nonami, not needing any clarification what she meant. But until we've finished clearing the area of talismans, we can't show it to you. I'm sorry, I hope you can understand. Yes, I understand, Issei-san. Thank you for doing this for me. It's no problem at all, truly, replied Nonami. It's what we do, after all. Send Sarah my regards, and we'll hopefully see you both tomorrow. Take care. Returning her phone to her pocket, Nonami turned to face Usuko, her expression grim. I need a favor from you, Usuko, and you're not going to like it. Time for some soup. So, Several minutes later, Usuko, in her magical girl form, was splayed out and strapped to a very large kite Nonami had produced from whatever extra-dimensional portal she used to store these things. To say she wasn't happy about it would be an understatement. Apparently, at least according to Nonami, getting Usuko airborne with this device, she called the Sky Spy, would allow her to see the remaining talisman's locations. Something not normally possible for such a large area, but with amplification from Usuko's inherent magical energy, it should be able to. Should, of course, being the sticking point for the Pinkette. "And you're sure this'll work?" she asked for the 17th time, cheeks bright red with embarrassment at the thought of someone seeing her panties like this. "In theory," replied Nonami once again, "but like most things involving your powers, it's not a sure bet. Still, it's better than nothing, wouldn't you agree?" Grimacing, Usuko gave a half-hearted nod as she and the kite were lifted into the air by Emiko and Rei. The kite itself was too heavy, even without Usuko, to let the wind catch it, of course, but would be able to stay aloft of its own volition once airborne, thus necessitating assistance from the Oni. "If it would make you feel better, Usuko," offered Emiko, as they got her in position, "I could make you invisible for the few minutes you're up here." Could you?" she replied quietly. "I'd be grateful." Nodding, Emiko made a sharp slashing motion with her right index finger, and suddenly Usuko was invisible. Well, at least to anyone but her, much to her slight disappointment, but overall gratitude. Down below, Nonami was tapped into the mystical power of the kite. With a map of the area to her right, and a pen in hand, she used automatic writing to mark down the locations they still needed to visit as they came to her. After about 5 minutes, Usuko was starting to get a little airsick, and called down to Nonami. "Hey, can I come down now? Please?" Holding up a single finger, Nonami quickly jotted down one last location before motioning for Emiko and Rei to guide her back to the ground. "All right," said Nonami once Usuko had been released. "There's only 12 more to find. We'll each take 3 and then meet up back at camp. Sound like a plan?" The Oni nodded, but Usuko seemed a little down. "Yeah, it's fine, I guess. I was kind of hoping we'd get to camp out tonight, I guess." Nonami pondered for a moment. After all, they had already set up their tents. It would be a waste of time and effort if they didn't. "I don't see any issue with it," she said, giving Usuko a warm smile. "Truth be told, I've never been camping just for its own sake. Sure, on missions I've had times where I've had to camp out for days or weeks on end. It might be nice to try it on its own for once." She turned to Rei and Emmy. "Do either of you have any objections?" Rei shook her head emphatically.
"No way! I'm more than happy to."
Emiko as well seemed more than a bit enthused at the concept. "We haven't been camping since our 5th grade trip. Isn't that right, Usuko?"
"Yeah, huh?"
she cheered. "I remember it well." "As do I," chuckled Emiko. "After all, you wouldn't stop telling people you saw a dragon." Usuko's face went red once again.
I did! I swear!" "Wait a minute."
Her expression changed from grumpy to ponderous to shocked in the span of a few seconds.
"Was that you?"
she shouted.
"Oh, this I gotta hear,"
laughed Rei. "Later," stated Nonami. "We'll have plenty of time for stories tonight, perhaps around a campfire. It probably wouldn't be a terrible idea to seek out firewood while we're searching, to save on time. Now here, I'll draw dividing lines on the map, and each of us will take a sector. Flyers will take the further ones out, and it shouldn't take more than an hour. All right, let's go." True to Nonami's word, it didn't take much longer for them to locate and dispose of the remaining talismans. The first one to return to camp was Nonami, who hadn't managed to find much in the way of decent firewood, but had located a wild sweetberry bush that was safe for consumption, and gathered quite a few for her friends to enjoy. She also located a rather plump raccoon for herself to drink from later, much to Usako, the second to arrive's, chagrin.
You gotta do that?
She asked, feeling a little sick at the idea of Nonami putting the thing in her mouth. I mean, no offense, but didn't you bring any, blood packs with you or something? Nonami sighed.
I did,
But there's a noticeable difference in taste between wild blood and regular blood. Certain forest creatures have quite the appetizing taste, especially raccoons, despite their reputation. The third to arrive was Ray, carrying 2 massive logs under her arms. Upon closer inspection, Usako realized Ray had uprooted an entire tree and cut it in half with her claws. I appreciate the enthusiasm, Ray, said Nonami, but that's a bit too large. Next time, just some branches will suffice. Finally, bringing up the rear an hour later was Emiko, who brought a large amount of usable wood with her. Apparently, it was why she'd been so late, as she was gathering up as many fallen tree limbs and sticks as she could carry. She had also had the prudent idea to gather several large stones, so as to create a fire pit, rather than leave the fire exposed. I admit that hadn't crossed my mind, admitted Nonami. You did well. Thank you, Emiko. Not a problem, smirked Emiko. After all, a leader needs to show initiative, does she not? Sighing heavily, Nonami began arranging the stones into a circle, while Ray began carving into her logs. They might not be able to use them as firewood, but that didn't mean they were useless. In only a few moments, her Oni claws had carved 4 log benches for them to sit on, as well as a couple stools and a few small bowls. Barely any wood ended up wasted, as even the scraps were used as decoration pieces. Wow! Remarked Usako as she sat down on one of the benches. This is really cool, Ray. What other hidden talents do you have?
Well, I'm honestly really great with tools of all sorts,
said Ray with more than a hint of pride.
Working with wood and stone come naturally to me as a Red Oni, but even more so because of my dad. He's the chief architect for our king, so ever since I was a kid, I got to learn, a lot from him.
That's wild, commented Usako.
I don't suppose you could, fix my dresser? Thing has a tendency to get stuck a lot. I'll see what I can do, Usako.
She winked.
Now, did anyone happen to bring any snacks? I'm a little hungry.
Emiko smirked yet again. As a matter of fact, I did. Unzipping her bag, she reached in and pulled out several chocolate bars, 2 bags of marshmallows, and 3 boxes of graham crackers. In addition to that, she also pulled out 4 unfamiliar black circular objects with a long wire handle attached. I've got the fixings for s'mores and some Jiffy popcorn my friend over in America sent me. Who wants what?
Popcorn?
Usako practically shouted.
Gimme!
Laughing, Emiko handed her one of the pans. How'd I guess, Ray, what would you like? Pondering for a moment, Ray grabbed one of the thicker limbs from the woodpile, slashed much of the exterior wood off, leaving only a long, narrow spear of core wood.
S'mores, please,
she cheered.
Just need to, fireproof my spike here a little.
Nodding, she turned to Nonami. I'm gonna guess neither for you, but I don't wish to be rude. So would you like something? Surprisingly, Nonami nodded. One of the popcorns, please. It's actually one of the few human foods we can almost taste. Cocking an eyebrow at that, Emily handed her a popcorn as well. The sun was beginning to set, so it was the perfect time to start up the campfire. Once the sticks had been arranged properly, Usako volunteered to ignite it. Only if you use less, gusto than the last time, said Emiko, referring to her previous encounter with Usako's flames.
Fine,
groaned the pinkette in reply as she summoned just a small bit of flame to ignite the branches. In minutes, they had a roaring blaze, and all 4 girls had their preferred snack, roasting over the flames. Quickly, the kernels in the Jiffy Pop began popping rapidly in both Usako and Nonami's pans, creating what looked like a foil balloon rising from the previously flat surface. Once the popping slowed to a minimum, they pulled them back and dumped the contents into the bowls Ray had carved. Meanwhile, the Onis were fixing up their s'mores. Ray being the more impatient of them and eating one of the marshmallows straight off the stick. Delicious! She cheered through molten fluff. Once things had settled down a bit, Ray turned to Emiko, a question on her mind.
Hey, Emmy, mind if I ask what you and Usa-chan were talking about earlier?
Swallowing a bite of her s'more, Emiko nodded, turning to Usuko. It's more her story to tell, though. Usa-chan, do you mind?
I guess not,
She replied, giving Emiko an odd look.
but you gotta be honest with me, Emmy-chan. Was that you I saw?
The brunette chuckled, laying a hand across her cheek. We'll get there when we get there. Sighing, Usuko began recounting the story. Get ready for baby Usuko. The 10-year-old Usuko huffed quietly inside the tent. It was way past lights out, and their class's end-of-the-year camping trip. On their class's end-of-the-year camping trip. But here she found herself, unable to fall asleep in the tent she was sharing with her best and really only friend, Emiko Ayame.
Just my luck, too,
She groaned to herself.
Everybody's gone to sleep, and only now does my body decide it's time to pee.
Glancing over, she checked to see if Emmy was asleep. If she wasn't, she'd be able to help Usuko get to the bathrooms. If she was, well, Usuko wasn't about to wake her up. Her bestie she might be, but she knew Emiko hated being woken up early.
Hey, Emmy,
She whispered as silently as she could.
you still up?
Emiko stirred a little, but otherwise didn't respond, telling Usuko all she needed to know.
Crap.
She thought, steeling herself as well as her 10-year-old self could.
Well, I guess I have no choice. Ninja mode activate.
Carefully easing out of her sleeping bag, making each motion as slowly and methodically as she could, Usuko began inching her way towards the tent flap. She was lucky that their tent used a zipper, rather than Velcro to seal itself shut, or Emiko would almost certainly have been awoken by the harsh sound. As it was, Usuko left the tent unzipped. She didn't plan on being long, after all, and made her way towards the only outhouse nearby. She knew she probably could go out in the trees, but she didn't want to risk getting attacked by an animal or something. Besides, she had a real disdain for nature in its untamed state. Finally, she reached the darkened building she'd been searching for. It seemed to be so far away from the tent, but that could just be because the darkness made it hard to see. As she opened the door, though, Usuko heard a noise like rustling in the nearby brush. Something was definitely out there.
Probably just a raccoon or something.
Usuko thought, nervously closing the door behind her. A moment later, once she'd finished her business, she slowly reopened the door, being careful not to make a sound. She'd made it this far, seemingly undetected. Now all she had to do was make it the rest of the way. But then, she saw something in the distance. It was big, it was dark, and it had large, leathery wings. Though it appeared to have its back to her, Usuko was certain of what she was seeing. A dragon. Immediately, she was gripped by a fear the likes of which she'd never known, retreating behind the door. A dragon? No way, she wasn't seeing it. It couldn't be. Peeking her head out once more, she tried looking for it again, but it had seemingly vanished. Or so she thought, as the sound of wings could be heard flapping through the sky, coming right towards her.
I'm doomed,
she thought grimly as the sound of wing beats grew closer and closer, and then vanished. Usuko tried looking for the beast, but to no avail. It had definitely vanished for real this time. Hey, Usuko! The pinkette nearly jumped out of her skin, only avoiding screaming by the hand clutched firmly over her mouth. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust, but then, Emiko! She tried to say, though the words came out muffled.
Usuko,
Whispered Emiko harshly.
what do you think you're doing up? You know Lights Out was 2 hours ago, right?
Usuko nodded as Emiko pulled her hand back, leaving a red imprint on Usuko's face.
Sorry, Emmy, I just needed
Emiko cocked an eyebrow, snickering.
Oh, really? Come on, Usuko, it's late. Let's go back to bed, The last thing we want is for one of the counselors to see us, and for you to get me in trouble. Again.
Nodding sheepishly, Usuko began making her way back to the tent. Once there, she quickly managed to fall asleep, but as she drifted off, she could swear she heard those leathery wings taking off once more.
The next day,
I told everyone what I saw, said Usuko, finishing the story, but of course no one believed me. Emiko at least had my back. She told people she'd heard something that night, but didn't know what it was. Still... She turned to Emiko, rubbing her chin ponderously.
Emmy, can you turn into your Super Oni form?
Emiko giggled. My what?
Your Super Oni form. Okay, I don't know what you call it, but the form with the wings and stuff, you know?
Ah, Shootin' Doji. Got it. Taking a moment to remove some of her outer guarding, oh, I found a typo. Her outer garments, some of her outer garments, Emiko's body assumed its regular Oni form before continuing to transform. From her back sprouted a pair of large, bat-like wings, her body itself bulking up to twice its previous size, and her horns growing in length, and into a defined curve shape. When she had finished, she turned to Usuko. Just what you meant? She asked. I'm assuming so, given it's the only other form I have. Usuko nodded, though seeing that form again brought back mixed feelings. She could almost recognize that silhouette. Just, she needed to know.
Can you go stand in the darkness real quick? Sorry, I just need a good reference, you know?
Instead, Emiko transformed back, putting her clothes back on and smiling. Usuko, I'll just put your mind at ease. It was me you saw that night. Here, let me explain. Emiko Ayame had been asleep for most of the past 2 hours, ever since lights out had been declared. Her dreams were peaceful enough, for an Oni anyway, but suddenly something began dragging her back to reality. It was a sound most people wouldn't be able to hear in their sleep, but as an Oni she could. It was like an odd vibration that she couldn't quite place in her half-asleep stupor. Then it occurred to her. It was the sound of a zipper. Immediately, she snapped up, just in time to hear light footsteps in the grass, fading into the distance. Glancing over, she saw Usuko was gone, and put 2 and 2 together. The little human had gone off on some midnight walkabout.
Great,
she thought grumpily.
I'd better bring her back before she gets us both in trouble.
Taking care not to be heard exiting the tent, young Emiko turned herself invisible, before taking on her Shootin' Doji form and flying up about 50 feet. She'd have a much better chance locating Usuko from the sky, she reasoned, and as luck would have it, she found her just as the girl was entering the outhouse. That actually made sense, she reasoned as she made her way over. Come to think of it, she needed to go as well. No, there would be time to worry about that later. Right now, she had to worry about Usuko. So caught up in her thoughts was she, that she didn't realize her illusion had faded. She was an amateur, after all, still requiring the use of a yokai crystal to supplement her burgeoning illusion powers. As she landed, she saw the door of the outhouse open, a pink-haired head peek outside before darting back in. One look told Emiko all she needed to know as to why. Oh, crap, she thought, taking flight once more out of panic. She needed to figure out what to do. Usuko had definitely seen something, though the darkness had definitely hidden Emiko's face, Though the darkness had definitely hidden Emiko's face, as mostly unrecognizable as it may have been, but even still. Landing carefully on the roof, Emiko willed herself back into her human disguise and slid down the side of the building, the side of the building, before walking up to the door. Good God, I can't read. She saw Usuko searching for any sign of whatever she might have seen, but didn't seem to notice Emiko's approach. Hey, Usuko? She asked, eliciting a brief yelp from the pinkette that Emiko staunched with a hand clasped over her mouth. Perhaps a bit too tightly, Emiko thought, realizing she was also panicking a bit too. She felt Usuko trying to speak through her hand, so she whispered to her.
Usuko, what do you think you're doing up? You know Lights Out was 2 hours ago, right?
She pulled her hand back to allow her friend to talk, and yup, she had definitely left a mark. Oops. Hopefully it would be gone by morning.
Sorry, Emmy.
Apologized Usuko with a small bow.
I just needed to pee, but you're not gonna believe it. I just saw a dragon.
Internally, Emiko couldn't help but laugh. She supposed she did somewhat resemble one of those mythical, extinct reptiles in that form. Still, she had to play it down. Usuko didn't know anything about Oni yet, or the larger world Emiko was part of. Doing her best to act aloof, she raised an eyebrow at the girl and forced herself to snicker a bit. Oh, really? She said, rolling her eyes and only just now realizing she'd left her glasses behind. She'd definitely need to avoid Usuko's gaze for the moment.
Come on, Usuko, it's late. Let's go back to bed, The last thing we want is for one of the counselors to see us and for you to get me in trouble. Again.
The pinkette nodded as Emiko began escorting her back to the tent, casting a basic silence illusion to make it all the easier to return undetected. Once she was certain that Usuko had fallen asleep, Emiko took flight once more and headed back to the outhouse. Her story now complete as well, Emiko turned to Usuko. I hope you can understand why I had to lie back then, Uso-chan. Were it my decision, you'd have known the truth about me a long time ago.
Emiko, you big dummy, she said, smiling warmly. It's totally fine. I may not understand a lot of stuff about all this, but I understand the fact it's gotta be a secret. So, does anyone else have any campfire stories?
Asked Ray after a few seconds.
That was a really nice story, and I want to keep the ball rolling.
Emiko chuckled. You Reds and your stories, eh? Well, I might have another tale for you. This one's about the time Usuko stole a goat. Usuko's face went bright, steaming red.
Emiko! You promised to never tell anyone!
A bit disappointed, Emiko patted Usuko on the head. Oh, all right. Glancing at the nearly set sun, Nonami stood up and cleared her throat. I'm going to deactivate my crystal now. Is that all right? Ray nodded, but Usuko looked confused. How come? I mean, it's fine. I'm just curious. Sorry. Nonami giggled. It's perfectly fine, Usuko. You recall how our crystals are alive, correct? Well, they need to rest and restore their energy, much like we do. Mine especially, after days like this. Closing her eyes and exhaling, Nonami immediately grew almost a foot taller, as her hair went from orange to black, and her figure filled out tremendously. The only downside to this, she said in heavily German-accented English, is the fact I cannot rely on the translator function of it. Fortunately, I believe we can all speak English, yeah? Usuko knew she could. It was her first language, after all, even if she couldn't speak it too well anymore. As for Emiko, she'd been taking classes since childhood, something Usuko now suspected had to do with her royal heritage.
Well, if Nami's doing it, I might as well too,
stated Ray as she shifted into her Oni form. Ah, that's so much better. Now, seriously, does anyone have a story to tell? Usuko turned to Emiko with a slightly feral glint in her eye. Immediately, Emiko knew exactly what Usuko was about to say, and was dreading it. Oh, I have a story, she said quietly. It all started on a night, just like this, in these very woods. Half an hour later, and Ray was curled in the fetal position, while Nonami was absolutely on the edge of her seat. Quite literally. So, then what happened? She asked tentatively, after he got out. Ray let out a pitiful moan as Emiko sighed knowingly. Usuko was admittedly a fantastic storyteller, able to really build up an atmosphere for the listener. This was evidenced by the red Oni currently rocking on the ground and sucking her thumb. But Emmy had known Usuko for many years. She knew exactly what the Pinkette was about to say. Mandor hand hook condor! She cried, spreading her arms wide, thrusting her face forward as she began cackling wildly, and causing Ray to scream and climb up a nearby tree. Nonami, meanwhile, was clearly let down by the Mimi ending, but also surprised by how well Usuko had managed to lull her in.
Very clever, my niece, she said teasingly. I certainly wasn't expecting that.
It took nearly an hour to coax the red Oni down, and by that point, all four girls were well and truly exhausted. Settling into their tents for the night, Emiko took Usuko aside for a moment. She had something she had to ask. Something she needed to know. Usuko, how do you feel about us? The Pinkette looked perplexed. This wasn't like Emiko, and neither was all the blushing.
What do you mean? You're my best friend, silly. Always have been, always will be.
Right. Yeah, she said, fumbling her hands behind her back.
Emmy, this isn't like you,
said Usuko, concerned.
Can you bend over for a sec?
Emiko complied, and Usuko put her hand against the brunette's forehead.
Wow, you're burning up.
No, wait, right. Since you're an Oni, I guess that's normal, huh?
Are you feeling all right?
Emmy nodded. Usuko, have you ever thought about, I don't know, the future? Like, where we'll be in 5 years? 10?
Is this really the best time?
Asked Usuko.
I mean, it's getting late, Emmy, and
Usuko, I think I have feelings for you. There, she said it. She got it out. Finally. Usuko was dumbstruck for a moment. There was no way she heard Emmy right. Nuh-uh. Emmy liked her? Liked her? Huh?
Emmy-chan? I don't.
Usuko turned away, and Emiko felt her stomach drop. Oh God, she'd screwed up, hadn't she? Why did she have to say it? Usuko, I'm sorry, Usuko turned back, smiling softly, tears flecking the corners of her eyes.
Emmy, I don't know if I feel the same way. Well, not right now. I mean, I admit sometimes the thought has crossed my mind, but I don't know if this is what I want.
She walked over, wrapping her arms around Emiko.
That said, I'm beyond touched. I mean it. Thank you, Emmy-chan. I think I just need some time to figure it out. Okay?
A wave of relief washed over Emiko like a tsunami. She could feel streams of tears flowing down her eyes as she hugged Usuko back. Sure, Usuko. Take as much time as you need. Emiko looked up at Emmy, a question on her lips.
Hey, Emmy, while I have you, I got another question if you don't mind. It's one I've been meaning to ask for a while now.
Emiko shook her head, smiling. Of course I don't mind, Uso-chan. Ask away.
Well, it's...
Usuko shuffled back and forth.
People keep calling you Princess Ayome? Yeah, that. Is that is that your real name? And are you really a princess?
Well, yeah, replied Emiko, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Yeah, Ayome is my Oni name, and I'm the heir to the throne after my father.
Holy shit,
whispered Usuko under her breath.
Well, that explains a lot, huh? Wow, my best friend is a princess.
That's pretty wild. Usuko hugged Emmy tight, sighing. I don't suppose there's anything else you need to tell me, she added with a wink. Well, yes, but not today, okay? She yawned. We'll talk more tomorrow. Deal? Deal, giggled Usuko enthusiastically. The rest of the night passed without incident. That is, until just after the sun had begun to peek over the horizon. But by then it was much too late. And that there's the end of part 2. And wow, I'm looking at the time, and that's about as long as the first part. Nice. So that confession, huh? Uso Emmy! Woo! You need to get at the popcorn bowl. Well, don't worry, Kagi. This is we're only doing one part. Well, we're only doing one part a day, and that's the end of part 2. So don't worry. I'm glad you're liking it. Yeah. I'll be honest. When I was writing it, I kept going back and forth. I was like, do I want to do this? I mean, we've already got Ray as like Ray. We already have Ray as a lesbian. Do I want to make Usuko and Emiko? And then I was like, you know what? Look at their hair colors, right? Right. Look, you get your bright pink and your blue. That's like 2/3 of the bi pride flag, and their shirts are purple. The two of them are practically breathing bisexual pride. So I was like, you know what? They are canonically. I made them both canonically bi. Which I just realized might be a part 4 spoiler, but anyway, part 4 is Thursday, so I mean it's yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'm gonna see if we got any. Let me just pop this open here. Hold on a second. Yay! I didn't lose any followers this time. Oh, somebody subbed this morning. Holy cow! Roller coaster of emotions. Yeah, that's the way I like it sometimes, you know. So I know you're not watching right now, Leonan, but thanks for the sub if you're watching this VOD later. But anyway, so tomorrow will definitely be part 3. Definitely. That will be that. I will say part 3 it's the Hime and Sarah chapter. And it was all I will say of it, but there is a lot of. But if you like seeing, Babby Usuko and Babby Emiko, well, guess what? We get to see Babby one more character. I wonder who it could be. I wonder if it's someone in the who might be next to Usuko. But yeah, for now, this is where we're gonna end things. It's 7:30, so I could probably. No, I told myself I'm doing no gaming streams this week. No gaming streams till Friday. God, I want to play Oblivion so hard right now, but I've told myself reading only. We're only doing reading streams this week till Friday. So until tomorrow, until part 3, this is where I will bid thee adieu. I hope to see you tomorrow. Until next time, take care, have a good night, and sayonara.